Hey, Raw Knuckles fans. Knuckles here. Listen, I'm going to take a little sabbatical, 2 weeks. We're here at a charity golf tournament today for my friend Liam Reason here in Montreal. And we'll be back live coming at you in 2 weeks. Thanks for being patient. Thanks for your support. And keep watching the Raw Knuckles podcast.
In the sauna, though, Chelly. In the sauna.
In the sauna. I invented that, just like Rocky invented hitting those goddamn cows in the where they slaughtered the cows. Market. I invented the sauna. Exactly.
That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine. Nyland's going ballistic. He's a freaking madman.
I'm Chris Nyland, and this is the Raw Knuckles podcast. All right, Chelly. We're ready to rock. How you been, buddy?
Good.
Great to see you. Geez, you know, we've been talking, Tim and I, how I had the opportunity to play with you at the very beginning, and he had the opportunity to play at the end. I said, did Chelly mature at all when you were in Atlanta?
No, yeah, I think so, Chelly. Me and you got sent down together. I think we had a good time.
Yeah, one game short with the Wolves of maybe winning another ring, but whatever. That's history.
Yeah, history, Chelly. When I think back and, you know, you born in Chicago, moved to California, how your career, you ended up with a Hall of Fame career, and you look back, it all started on a beach. Tell us the story about how it all began.
Yeah, our family, when I was 16, we moved to San Diego and pretty much thought hockey was over with, you know, just at that time, believe it or not, I was pretty good in school, so I just planned on getting an education, going to college, and figuring out what I wanted to do. But I tried out for that college team in San Diego. It was our first year, but they'd promised so many scholarships to all the Canadian kids that came down that that there just was no spots. And I also got mono during the tryout. That didn't help my case either. But anyway, I got cut. Quit playing hockey for probably 3-4 months, just was, you know, hanging out. And then I met that kid, Bobby Parker, on the beach of all places. And he mentioned that there was a guy in Moose Jaw that was looking for players. And, you know, one phone call basically changed my life.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to tell that story. I'm glad you told that because I've probably butchered that story like 5 times. But, no, it is an amazing part of your career. And I think, you know, you also called and said you changed positions, right? Like at that time, like they needed a defenseman and you were playing forward type thing?
Yeah. I mean, actually, first time I called, they wanted me to pay my own way up there, and I'd done that the year before when I actually went to Hawkesbury outside of Montreal there to go try out and got cut. And this time my dad wasn't going to pay. You know, we really didn't have any money for the flight. So after the first conversation with the coach, you know, basically it ended like that. You know, I'm not going to pay my way up there. So 3 days later, they called. He had lost 2 games and offered to pay my way up there. And I, you know, he said, what position are you? I said, well, what do you need? He goes, well, I need defenseman. I said, well, I play defense. So I never played defense other than the, you know, senior leagues. And that's, you know, that's how that story came about.
And that's like your mindset at that point is like, are you just love the game that much? You actually had it, you thought you could play like in the NHL or like, you know what I mean? Like, or was it just like, hey, I'm going to try to keep playing hockey type mentality?
Yeah. I mean, you're from Chicago, 2 states, you're a lot younger than me, but I mean, nobody realistically from my era, my age was making it to the NHL. And that wasn't my dream to play in the NHL. I just love playing. And this trip to Canada just was a way to keep playing, you know, longer. That's all. Not to, you know, I was hoping to get a college scholarship. Basically, that's all I was shooting for, not play pro hockey. And like I said, it wasn't my dream to play pro hockey. I didn't grow up saying I wanted to play pro hockey. If anything, I wanted to play baseball. You know, I realistically thought I had a chance because I was actually a pretty good pitcher, you know, growing up as a kid in Chicago. But no, and, you know, from everything going from so bad up to that point, and then when I got to Moose Jaw, you know, everything went well. You know, from the first week there, you know, it just clicked, and, you know, I got lucky.
So, Chelly, you're in Moose Jaw. How does Wisconsin happen? Did someone scout you? Did your coach there help you go the college route? How did Wisconsin happen?
Yeah, it was Tier 2 league. Moose Jaw was, a Tier 2 league, so which kept you eligible. So my first year there, honestly, I wasn't thinking college either because I was basically ineligible for, when I went to that United States International University, I lost eligibility for a year just by doing that. So I had this friend that I lived with in Moose Jaw. He was an overage. And he told me the only way, after he saw how I did, for my first season, the only way I'm going to make pro and get drafted was if I played Tier 1. And that's when I took that trip to Lethbridge, Alberta, that next year. And I played about 2 weeks there, a couple exhibition games. And after that, I wasn't physically ready. I was fighting, wasn't a good fighter. I was getting killed. And my friend Terry Tatum, who brought me there, drove me right back to Moose Jaw and said, you better just get a scholarship and go to school. So that's what happened.
No, I'm just amazed that, obviously, I know you, Chelly, as a teammate and a friend, and obviously, I wasn't asking these questions when we played, but it's just crazy to think about, just kind of the mindset of, you would think with your career Hall of Fame, like, most people would probably think like the obsession, but it's just kind of like, hey, like you said, I'm trying to go to college or whatever with hockey. Next thing you know, you're fucking teammates with this guy. And then obviously the rest is history. But those are the kind of things that I like to hear. I just think, a lot of people don't, they hear the overnight success story and that's all they care about. But it's like kind of that journey. And then you kind of, as you were, like you said, in Chicago, there wasn't, even when I was playing, I played high school my first 2 years. Freshman, sophomore year, I played JV my freshman year. But I didn't get, a new AAA team came in. The Chicago Chill, and that's kind of how I tried out and made that team, and then kind of went from there with how things. But the exposure, there was nothing. No one was coming out. I think it was like you, Bates, Battaglia, maybe was another guy, Joe Corvo. But it was very. Now I feel like everyone's from Illinois that I see in the NHL. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much it's evolved.
Yeah, those guys you mentioned, Battaglia and Corvo, they're still 10 years. Younger than I am too. So if you think about, back, early 70s in Chicago, a couple guys made it to junior, that I grew up with on the South Side, but no one really made it any further than, whether it was U.S. junior or going up to Canada. But there wasn't anybody who really made pro back then. Maybe a couple minor league guys, but just for very small stints. So. Like I said, my timing was a little early, but, I think what happened with the 80 team kind of woke a few, scouts up and about American players. So that's probably the biggest reason why I got such a look, quite honestly.
Did you play did you go to Mount Carmel?
I did. I played 2 years at Carmel my last year. And like you, similar to you, I played JV, most of my, all of my freshman year and most of my second year. And then at the end, between injuries and the guy got suspended actually for that championship game was the only reason why I really played. And then, I moved right after that sophomore year out to California.
So, Chelly, your time at Wisconsin, then you go to was the U.S. team when you played the Olympics in '84, was that a surprise for you that you ended up with that team, or were you destined for that Olympic team?
No, not destined. I mean, my first year at Wisconsin, there was no talk about me being on the Olympic team. I'd been in Moose Jaw, quite honestly. No one knew where I'd gone. Especially my friends from Chicago. I just kind of moved, and that was it. No one, realized that I was still playing hockey. So I still wasn't, on anybody's radar. I hadn't played, on any U.S. teams growing up, in any of those World Juniors, or I should say I was too old or young at that point. But and then after my second year, after having such a good year my first year, that's when I kind of got on everybody's radar. That's when I made the World Junior team. And then I was, guaranteed a spot. At that time, it was amateurs. So I was guaranteed a spot, basically like the first month or 2 months of my sophomore year at Wisconsin. So that's when I kind of knew it was a reality that, I'd been drafted. I was going to be on the Olympic team, and then I would have to make a decision whether I was going to turn pro or go back and finish off my last 2 years of college. And obviously, I decided to turn pro after the Olympics, and you were there, Nux. So
yeah. Well, I was going to bring that up. I never forget the first time we met. It was on Atwater in Des Maisonneuve, right at the players' entrance in the back, and you come walking around the corner from the Manuel Lemoyne. You had that little green winter jacket on. pair of jeans,
Yep.
and a pair of, I think they were Stan Smiths with no socks on. There was like 6 inches of snow, and you're walking around the corner, jacket wide open. I'm there, oh, this kid, he's a beauty right away. I'll never forget that day. But coming to Montreal from the Olympics that year, how like intimidating was that for you, knowing the history of the team, the number of Stanley Cups they won, the organization? How intimidating was it?
You mean, I mean, I'd never been to Quebec other than that, that year I went to go try out for Hawkesbury. And quite honestly, I never watched pro hockey growing up in Chicago. Stapes, you can see why. It was never on TV, the Hawks game. So we didn't have the opportunity to watch a lot of NHL hockey. And then when I moved to San Diego, zero. So getting to Montreal, and when I got to Montreal, I was actually hurt. I broke my ankle in the Olympics. So I watched the first 2-3 games when Bob Berry was coaching at the time, and to see the team wasn't doing well, how critical the fans were, in the rink during the games. If someone missed a pass or there's a bad play, they're booing the home team. So I learned quick, these people are real serious and knowledgeable, and after the history of Montreal and them so used to winning all these Stanley Cups, I learned pretty quick, and it was very intimidating. I was on radio shows, and people were asking me who I thought I was coming in. Think I'm going to make a difference to the team, and a lot of pressure. There's no question. There's a ton of pressure, but I didn't really let it bother me. Thank God I couldn't read the French papers. They're very critical, and that would have been tough. Having to deal with that too. I played and. My first 13 games were horrible. I didn't play well. And then I got into that first game in the playoffs, and someone flipped a switch, scored my first goal of the playoffs against Boston, and everything from that point on, next we lost out to the Islanders in the, semifinals. We were on a great run. So I was lucky the way things went for me.
I was just thinking about that whole crowd experience. I was just you go to a Hawks game now, and it's like I could be wrong, but maybe I'm just everyone's just like shoot. You got the guys got the puck at the red line, like it's just like they're partying. No one knows hockey. Yeah. I feel like, and then when I got the obviously playing in Winnipeg, I know that experience of just the fans and knowing the game, like I'd go to like the dry cleaners, and the guy would be like bitching about the power play, and I'd be like, were you just in the meeting we had? Because you're exactly right. Like it is
crazy,
right? Like it is crazy, like how much of a difference the knowledge is in fans and stuff.
But back then they had no glass behind the benches even. So at the time, after my I think it was my third or fourth game, this guy he kept yelling at us to get going and wake up, and so I turned around and told him to shut up, not in those words, but basically the same. After the game, we're in the dressing room, and we'd won the game, and I'm sitting there with Craig Ludwig, and here comes the old guy that I was yelling at. It was Senator Molson. So I thought right away, well, that's a bad start, telling the owner and the Senator Molson of the team to shut up. And he came right up to me, and he loved it. He says he likes that kind of energy. I'm like, thank God. I could have got traded my first week in Montreal. So, like I said, they're knowledgeable people, and they expect a lot of you.
Yeah, it's funny, Stapes. They had the president of the team and the owners all sat right behind the bench, and there was no glass there, so they could hear everything. Mr. Molson's wife, we're telling everybody, fuck off, fuck you, you suck. We're screaming at people, and the wives are sitting there. It was hilarious. One night, they had the King of Denmark and his wife behind us sitting there, and I was going off on someone. We were playing Boston. I don't know, but I had some very foul language. And I remember Mr. Corey, the president at the time, came in between periods. He said, hey, can you keep it down a little bit for the wife of the King of Denmark? I'm like, fucking, see you later, Ronald. But, Chelly, thinking of those times, and, that second year, and I remember Steve Penny come in that year. We got up 2-0 on the Islanders. They come back 4 straight in the conference final.
Yeah.
We're out. I remember coming back from New York on the plane, and I was walking through the airport with Greeny, and there was a ton of people at the airport. And Greeny said to me, can you imagine we ever won the Stanley Cup here, what it would be like? Here we lose in the conference final. There's people greeting us at the airport. And it was the next year we end up going to the Stanley Cup final in Calgary. And it was, I mean, incredible what we were able to pull off. What were your memories of that year? Obviously, we had, Alcatraz. We were staying in the hotel, right? Jean-Perron Puddinghead, the coach, the time they put us in a hotel to keep us away from downtown. They didn't want us down there. The least amount of distractions as possible. But what do you remember from that time?
I mean, I think it was Jacques Lemaire actually was the one that started that, right? The year before when we went on that run again and ended up losing the Islanders. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. Like that, it was we were so close to the team and everybody's together and we got along so well. And then obviously when you start doing well in the playoffs, we had that 7-game, series against Hartford. And I remember you had that famous back check next where you caught this guy in a 2-on-1 and then Claude Lemieux comes back and scores.
That's when you know you're a fighter, huh? You had a famous back check.
Yeah. And I never seen Nuck skate so fast in my life. That's how hungry, the guys were and Nucks was. And then, we went on, beat the Rangers and, we just built momentum. But just like I said, it's work and it's hard, but it's fun. And the deeper you go in the playoffs and then, obviously winning in Calgary, the celebration, with the wives and all the, just a limited amount of family we had there in the dressing room. And then, we flew that red eye back. And when we got to that airport, I think Larry Robinson and Bob Gainey were the only two that figured out how to get out, a back way so they didn't have to walk through all those people. But I can remember Dave Maley started swinging at people. He got claustrophobic and we were stuck in the middle of baggage claim trying to get through there. And thousands of people jammed inside that airport terminal was really the first thing that come to mind, how crazy it was. And then, of course, the parade, riding in the back of that car with, the late Tom Kerbers, a great teammate, great friend.
Kirby.
A parade that was probably should have lasted 2 hours, down St. Catherine, lasted 4.5 hours, getting overserved by the fans. And then, what a train wreck I was when I got to the Forum to go on stage. And, it happens. I was young, and I just, to celebrate with the city, and the weather was beautiful. I mean, they tore that city apart the night we won it, and we won. I can't imagine what they'd have done if we lost to those, St. Catherine there, with the cars and the fires. And so, yeah, it was just something I'll never forget. And it was, you couldn't win the cup in a better city. That's for sure.
Yeah, Chelly, when I think back of that era and obviously winning that cup, how the parade, everything, I think when you first came in, you surprised a lot of people. And I say that because, honestly, we didn't know much about you. We knew American kid coming in. I was happy because we're another American on the team. But one thing people didn't, I think you surprised a lot of people, is how tough you were. And I remember being in Boston and squaring up with O'Reilly, and I actually have a picture in here of you trying to fucking get in between the two of us to break up my fight.
I know.
You're like, you didn't want fucking me fighting O'Reilly. I'm like, Chelly, get out of the way. Same fucking thing happened in that brawl, to end all brawls with Dave Brown. You're there with Brownie trying to fucking keep me from fighting Brownie. I think that was the biggest surprise about you. A lot of people they figured college kid, I can't be that tough. And you come in and you played the game nasty, the way it should have been fucking played.
Yeah, I learned that in Moose Jaw. I was the only American in the league, and I had no choice. So, it's either you adapt or die. And I had never been in a fight in my life on the ice until I got to Moose Jaw. And the first fight was with Garth Butcher. Remember Garth Butcher, that tall, lanky defenseman, tough kid, but he was 15 at the time, and he got me good. He whipped the hell out of me that first fight, but as soon as we got out of the box, I went right after him. I did okay, and then, you learn. In 2 years, I had a lot of fights, And then I'll never forget my first fight. Knox, you were the first guy to come up to me. You're so happy I fought Steve Casper that first game in the playoffs. Actually, it wasn't the playoffs. It was my first game against Boston in the Garden. And you grabbed me and shook my head. And then you were really mad at me for getting involved, like trying to get in between you and O'Reilly. And I think that's I'm not sure if that's a fight you dropped him with that punch that you got right in the eye.
No, that was later, though. It was later.
That was the end of Terry O'Reilly. I think that was his last year. And I know you loved O'Reilly growing up and you respected him, but those are some good battles. But yeah, and then you had the one brawl when you lined up in the face-off and you're with Jay Miller and then Dum Curran, that baby feet or baby stuff. He tried to run in after you, and I caught him, and that's when I'll tell you, Whitey was so proud of me. That's when Whitey adopted me. Is when when I
you were
jumped in for you
adopted
that
right
game.
then.
So yeah, so
There's no
yeah, I
question.
became part of the family.
Yeah, you
but
did.
anyway, like I said, it was just you had to back then at least protect yourself, and you had to show up and defend yourself. Otherwise, people take advantage of you.
So as your career went along, I loved. I mean, this is awesome to hear these kind of, obviously, just what it was like for you guys. But now, as you went on with your career, and obviously you became more, you could say like offensive defenseman, kind of like and you still had your style. Like as you played with like tough guys, say like Chris, or like Probert. You played with Probert, right? Was he still there, or was he gone when you went to Detroit?
I actually played with Proby in Chicago.
Yeah. Now, playing with guys like that, did you feel like, were you like me, where like all of a sudden you grew like a few inches and it just felt like kind of safer, or were you just with your style, you never thought about that?
I mean, I didn't think about that till I got to junior, and then obviously Nux was my babysitter on and off the ice. So you get room, and it helps a lot when Dale Hunter and all these guys are chasing you around, and then Nux comes on, and all of a sudden it gets real quiet. So, and I mean, all my best friends on the teams were usually the tough guys and the fighters because they took care of me, and I couldn't have done it without them. There's a lot to be said for that. And still, even though the game's changed a lot, a perfect example is that kid Reeves, what he's doing for the Rangers. It's a totally different team now with him around, and they have added a little grit and size. And so it's always going to be part of the game. And, regular season, it doesn't, that's when I think it has the most impact. Playoffs, you got to play hockey, but you still need those guys. And, I didn't take them for granted, and give Nux credit. Like he taught himself how to play and ended up on the top checking line for years.
His Nux, what happened? And he had the famous back check.
And then I scored goals, Tim. Tim can't believe I scored goals, Charlie.
Well, did you have 19 or 20 the one year?
21.
You scored 19 goals one year, didn't you?
Yeah, he knows. 21
goals.
I got 19. I had 1 year 21, 1 year 19, another year 17 for a plumber.
Yeah, and you're playing with two other plumbers, and Bob Gainey. Carbo wasn't a plumber, but Bo wasn't he wasn't a playmaker. He just worked his ass off. But yeah, and give credit Jacques Lemaire. He gave Nux that opportunity and taught him how to play it, and he turned into a reliable, very reliable, defensive player, and shutdown player.
Where does your work? So your work ethic? My wife's Greek, and I'm 0 for 500 in arguments, so I know how. But where does that? Obviously, there's a work ethic that you're kind of like just born. I mean, you're born with some, above and beyond, playing as long as you did, and obviously being able to kind of experience like the things you would do to prepare, and obviously just showing up every day. Where do you think that? Does that come from your parents?
Absolutely. All they did was work their whole life to provide for us, and mostly restaurants and bars, for the most part. 80-hour weeks, crazy hours, but still managing. My mom raising 5 kids, and Dad somehow trying to squeeze in as much kid time as he could. He made every time I was playing, he tried to make everyone if he could. But again, I saw how hard my dad worked in the restaurant, at home. It was just, for me, it was natural because I was raised like that, growing up in the restaurant bar business. If it didn't work, I was going to get a little bit of a tongue lashing, or not a beating, but, a backhand. So you learn, and you don't want to get hit. You want to do the right thing. So that's what you do. So, And it just carried over onto the ice. I'd never mind the hard work ever. I think I was ahead of the curve when it came to training, just because of evolution and the training methods. I mean, I think back at, guys like Bob Gainey, Larry Robinson, the only training back then was a stationary bike and maybe bench press. That's about it.
In the sauna, though, Chelly. In the sauna.
In the sauna. I invented that, just like Rocky invented hitting those goddamn cows where they slaughtered the cows.
Market.
I invented the sauna. Exactly. Yeah. So I'll take credit for that. But yeah, hard work was. I loved it. I'd be first one at the rink, last one to leave, and it's something I really enjoyed, and obviously it paid off.
Stapes. Chelly had a key to the locker room in Montreal. He would go to the locker room like at night, an off night. He would go down to the locker room and work out by himself, take a sauna. The only guy in the team who had a key to the locker room.
Yeah, well, it started because there wasn't much video back then, and we had this video guy, Fred. I remember,
Freddie.
That's Freddie.
Yeah.
And no one really watched a whole bunch of video, but Jacques Lemaire, took his time and taught me. And I wouldn't mind, going in at night and, going to once he taught me how to run the machines there and everything in the audio video. I'd watch a lot of tapes in there. I mean, we had a small apartment. Me and Nux actually lived in the same apartment complex our first 2 years, and it was literally 100 yards, not even, from the Forum. So I had no problem going over there using the sauna, the cold tubs, and watching the video. It was the way away from home, and that's basically where I spent all my time, was at the Forum.
Yeah, Knox, when Chelly came to the Wolves, within like 24 hours he had a sauna installed, so it was great. But he needed that. He needed that sauna.
Well, yeah, I remember thinking back, we lived in the same building there, and I remember, I was newly married, young family. I think Colleen was born at the time, and I was up on like the 17th floor, and they were on the 12th, and I say, hey, I'm going to go down and watch the game tonight, right? With Chelly and the guys. I come down, I open the door. Huge, just huge party going on. Yeah, watching the game. I was down there till like 4 in the with all the young
guys. We got a lot
guys.
of free beer from Molson. Every guy. Yeah, every guy was. We had 8 rookies. We had 8 rookies. So I mean, no one had a wife. No one had anybody live with any girls. So we were like brothers. So we took turns. We all spent the same amount of time. And the Molson family, being as generous as they were each giving us 5 cases a month each free of beer, so that worked out pretty good for us.
Yeah, it was like ever since you told him to shut up, you got free. Yeah, right.
Yeah. He said, we got to keep this kid.
He's like, I knew this would pay off.
Stocked.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, then we had some. Ryan Walter was a born again Christian, so he didn't drink his beer. I got his, and whoever didn't pick up their beer every month, I'd get their beer and throw it in my truck, and I was loaded. It was awesome.
So, Chelly, we win the cup together. It was awesome. Your first Stanley Cup in your second season, basically. Then you go on. I moved on, obviously, and I was with the Rangers. And I remember that year in the playoffs, and I want to talk about the incident. And I only wish I was there. I was so pissed off I wasn't. I was watching on TV. When you had hit Prop with that clean check and Hextall come after you.
Yeah, it was like, it was kind of a payback to Prop. He had slashed me earlier in the season, broke my finger, and I didn't say nothing. I just waited, and it's not like I knew that was going to happen to him. Unfortunately, it hit his head on one of those metal girders, in the glass, and that's what actually did it. And I'm not going to say it was a clean hit because I did get my elbow up, but by no means did I mean that it to be that severe. But yeah, and I was expecting something to, somebody to do something. One of those Sutters took a shot at me. Someone else did, and fortunately, I didn't get hurt and, survived that series. And we went on to, to beat Philadelphia that series.
I was thinking more, too, obviously, out of the winning the Cup in Montreal. You won 3 of them. Like, do they all have different meanings? Like, what did you like, did one mean more to you than the other?
Well, I think not so much meant more to me, but what the differences were when I was in Montreal, I just shared it with the guys, my teammates. I didn't have family there. I didn't have kids. And then 17 years later, I went over with Detroit, and I got sons that are, 10 and 8 years old. The girls were 7 and 5, and, that was awesome to share with my kids, and they were old enough to understand and be at the game. So it was two different, much older team with Detroit when we won it in 2002. So, no way was one better than the other. For your first cup, I think I should have celebrated like I did, get, hammered and just have a great time. And then the second one, more reserved and, just sharing it with the city and the fans and your friends and, the family. Yeah.
And then the third one was Malibu, right?
Well, both times we celebrated in Malibu. The first one, it was incredible because we had everybody from Rocky, Sylvester Stallone to, the guy from Meathead, Rob Reiner. And, it wasn't like I invited these people, but it was on the beach and it was a public beach. And from, through social media, people just found out the Stanley Cup was there. So, and we had Kid Rock, ended up performing on the beach. We had set up a stage and a band. So it was amazing. And then same thing in Chicago. We brought it to Wrigley Field. We brought it to White Sox Park. The local bars and, the grammar school and my high school. So pretty special when you could share that Stanley Cup with all the people you grew up with and your coaches and friends. And, that's what it's all about.
That thing is like crazy though. That thing's like Justin Bieber walking, everyone just goes to that. It's nuts.
Stops traffic.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's even the people in California when we took it out to the restaurant at night, they didn't know what it was. It's just the sight of that trophy, and people drinking out of it. It's a real special tradition that only hockey does.
They tried to order what you were drinking. They're like, "Hey, give me one of those."
Yeah, most of the time it's beer, or champagne, but I'm sure guys have put a lot more other things in there. So it's pretty cool.
We're in conversation with my friend, Chris Chelios, former teammate, along with Tim Stapleton here. Chelly, we look at some of our fans who listen to the show and text in. They love asking questions. And one of them was, which team did you enjoy the most? Canadiens, Blackhawks, or Red Wings? I don't want to even throw the Thrashers in there, but I got to say
that was his favorite. Aside from the Thrashers.
3 original 6 teams. Which one was your favorite?
Yeah. Honestly, Knox, in all seriousness, I can never pick a favorite because the fact that I just love playing, I was fortunate enough to, start with Montreal, win a cup, the way the people treated me. And as sometimes as bad as it got there with the media and the pressure, not once did it bother me. I wake up and it's another day. So, and then Chicago, I think the only thing different and special about Chicago was that I was going back home and everybody that I grew up with, coaches, family, relatives, they got the chance to see me play for my hometown, and that, to me, that's pretty special when you can make the NHL and actually, be able to play in the city where you grew up. And Detroit, spent the most amount of time, 10 years there to win 2 cups. Again, it was my family, raising my family, the kids, basically, we were there for 20 years total, raising my kids there. So I mean this in all sincerity, they were all special in their own way, but I could never pick a favorite. Like it just, everybody and, everyone, it was 3 great experiences throughout my career.
It's a good problem to have. I don't, to choose, which cup is more meaningful. Like I can't even come close to that. But that's, no, it's incredible for sure.
Yeah, and had I won a cup in Chicago, I might have said, okay, winning it in my hometown. I think Mark Messier is one guy that comes to mind. He's from St. Albert, Alberta, and he, right around the corner from Edmonton. So he's another guy that was in the same situation. But I'm not going to say it's a regret. And I had a great career, but you can't have everything perfect. Ray Bourque had to go to Colorado, win a cup. Rob Blake had to go to Colorado, win a cup. But it would have been something it would have been amazing to have won the cup, playing for Chicago in my hometown. That would have been icing on the cake for my career.
We know you're the competitive person that you are, and the way you played the game, you were all in all the time, loved being at the rink. How about the Greek bobsled team? What was that all about?
You know what
happened there?
Quite honestly, Here's the deal. I was in the cafeteria and I saw the Greek guys, with their, they had their uniforms on, and I always go over and say hi to the Greeks, whatever, every chance I get. I got just a big supporter, obviously the Greeks being proud. And I started talking to them, and, we just kept in touch and contact, and a couple of the guys are from Chicago. So we decided to get together, and at the time when we got back together after the Olympics, they were having a tough time raising money, and they thought it'd be a great idea if I, just came to come a couple of the world tournaments and, actually competed and help them out to raise some money at some of these functions. So that's all it was. At first I thought, this would be fun, get to go down a bobsled, learn how to bobsled. Not much to it, other than you run as fast as you can and jump in the sled. So, I went to Calgary to the World Championships, took a lot of heat from these Canadian bobsledders. They're telling me I don't know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And there is a lot of work involved. Most of those guys are track guys. Their legs are huge, and it's about running. But at the end of the day, I did it for fun. I seriously did want to, compete for the Greeks if I could. At that point, there was a lockout that season, so the timing would have been okay. And then I, decided because I would be taking someone else's spot if they were to qualify, I didn't want to do that. So, and then we ended up on our head a couple times. The driver, was flipping us a few times. That was no fun going, 80 miles an hour down the track on your head. But again, I made a lot of good friends, had a lot of fun. Got to go to New York and down Lake Placid to do a world championship, or a World Cup, I should say, and also try and qualify in Calgary. So at the end of the day, I made some good friends and had a lot of fun doing it.
How'd you get Jake on the Chinese Olympic team?
Well, you've been over there.
I'm just speaking of the Olympics.
Yeah.
He's like, Chelly's like, you're from there. You're from there. No.
Jake, my son Jake got himself on that team. And basically, I think people don't understand is you don't give up citizenship. You just get a visa for that country. So if you go play any country over in Europe for 2 years, as long as you haven't competed for another team, meaning another country, you can qualify to play for any country in the Olympics. And it just so happened, he was playing in the KHL, the Premier League over in Russia, and China had a team in that league along with Finland. And he played there 2 years and, had done pretty well. And then the Chinese people, committed to him to be on that team. So I'll tell you what, though, for Jake, it was a great experience for him. I hadn't seen him that happy, since he got called up to Detroit, to play for the Red Wings for those 7 games that he played. And, he came back, unfortunate with the situation now, what's going on, in Ukraine and Russia. And, he's obviously, it's going to be a big decision for him to, whether they go back to Russia or not, or China's even going to, participate again in the KHL with their team. So, but again, back to Jake, he had the time of his life. It was great that he matched up against USA, Germany, and Canada. And so we got to see those games, which was great.
No, you're right. I when I was in Belarus, they offered the same thing. I ended up playing with the World Championship U.S. team, so I couldn't. I knew I was going to play World Championships, and I was like, like you said, it was like 2-3 years you can't represent another country. But no, I saw it. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was awesome. Jake got to do that, and I'm sure it was a great moment for you to see. And I was rooting for him, but that was pretty cool. Cool that he got to do that for sure.
Yeah, it was a tough situation because Chinese, the way they handled their quarantine was way more protocol than any other country. Like they had to quarantine in their hotel room for 10 days, and that was just before the Olympics. They only got to skate, 3 days before the Olympics. Jake had lost almost 12 pounds, from the time they went to China to the time the Olympics started. So everything that could go against them did. They lost their goalie, their number one goalie in that elimination game to Canada after the first period. So, but again, it was a hell of an experience for Jake. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, Chelly, when you look at the kids, and again, I remember when little Chris was on the way, Chris Jr., I remember Big Serge came to me and he said, "Hey, big boy, whatever you do, don't name him Chris." I did that with my Serge, and it was a big mistake. Anyway, I went ahead and named him Chris. Now, do you think, I figure anyway, the last name was going to be regardless. But do you think sometimes the last name can kind of put a little more pressure on your kids, per se, when they're playing sports?
Well, definitely your kid and my kid, because we had targets on our back throughout our whole career. No question. And I saw it, obviously, growing up as they played youth hockey, especially when they went to Canada. And even in Michigan, Chicago, they're going to test them because they figure they're like their old men. And my kids handle it very well. Dean was more of a skill player, so that wasn't his game, being aggressive. And, he wasn't a fighter. There's no question. Jake was a little more aggressive. He played that type of game, but they weren't mean kids. They were tough. There's a difference. And if anybody was mean, it was my daughter Kaylee, when she played sports. So as sweet as she is off the ice or off, the field, she was the one that had the mean in her. So it probably took after me most likely. But for the most part, the boys handle it well. It had to bother them a little bit. I think the Greeks, I don't have to worry about that. The Greeks, they skip a generation. So I'm named after my grandpa. So technically I can't name my kid. I don't want to piss my old man off. So yeah, those Italians, the Italians just like, Chris 1, Chris 2, Chris 3, but the Irish, they got, they don't really have a set tradition. Do they, Nux? I don't know about the Irish.
No, not really. It depends.
I'm Irish too,
usually,
guys,
Yeah, you are half Irish, right, Timmy?
Yeah. So I'm just saying he could have asked me too, but I don't know. We don't have a no.
I didn't know you were Irish.
Yeah,
Sorry. What's your What's your other
Filipino?
What's your other? So, but Stapleton's not an Irish name, is it?
My dad's my dad looked like he took me from the Philippines. He's from Michigan.
He was kidnapped.
Yeah. I'm still finding my dad, but
you might want to get a blood test. Yeah.
No, but speaking of Kaylee, real quick, your daughter, she was a big time lacrosse player, right? I think that's when I met her.
Yeah.
So what she's doing now, was that part of the, was that in the picture or before? Or that's gotta be pretty cool for you to see her doing what she's doing now, right?
Oh, I'm so happy. Now she's back in Chicago. She was with Tampa Bay Lightning for 4 years, doing the broadcasting. But quite honestly, she played hockey, she played lacrosse. But she figured, lacrosse was her best avenue to get into a great school for journalism. So there was a plan, and it's not like that's what she knew she was going to do in high school. But the minute she got to college and figured it out, that's what she had her mind set on. And, girls like Catherine Tappan, that was her mentor. That's who she wanted to be. And she's built a name for herself there in Tampa, and now it's carried over to Chicago. And she's been working with Pat Foley at Olachek, and she's got herself a nice little niche here, doing all the Hawks games. And the only tough thing, she got 2 little kids, and that's, she's walking around tired, but somehow she manages to pull it off. And I couldn't be prouder for her. I look back, my sisters didn't have that opportunity. The women of that era, didn't have that, opportunity to pursue careers, and it just wasn't the thing. And now she's, right in the thick of things. So
she sounds
really
awesome,
happy
by the
for
way.
her.
And I'm not trying to just be nicer. I watch, obviously in the intermissions once in a while, and she sounds great. So
she can talk, that kid. Sometimes too much, but that's if you're in that
she's
business.
Really good. She's really good, Chelly. I remember, when I had the radio show, I had her on the show quite a bit when Montreal and Tampa get together, and she was awesome, really. And we actually went back and talked about a few of our times here in Montreal with her. It was pretty funny. Chelly, talk about coaches. I have my favorite coach was Lemaire. Certainly helped me a whole lot. And, you near the end having Mike Babcock when you were in Detroit. How was your relationship with him? And, was it good at the beginning and get bad, or was it ever good, your relationship with Babcock?
Pretty bad from the get-go. Don't ask me why. I tried like hell to win his heart, whether it was working hard. I did what I was told. And, as much as been said about me and Babs, there was never any arguments. He's yelled at me a few times. I healthy scratched myself. He didn't like that. But, it was just something, it's crazy. We had history. He played in the Saskatchewan. When I played for Moose Jaw, he was playing for either Yorkton or Saskatoon. And then when we were in Montreal, he was actually going to McGill at the time. And I don't know if he was playing there for the team or he was just attending school. And I think back and he was in the bars there when we were there. We'd walk in and he would be there with his buddies. He'd walk out because he kind of liked to be the big man on campus. But, when he got hired, his first opening line, to me when we had our first meeting was, you're here as a 5th or 6th defenseman. And if you don't like it, you can go see Kenny Holland. I'm sure he'll trade you. And I'm like, geez, why would he, why would he say something like that? And again, I played, I did, slide into that 5th and 6th spot as a mentor, for the young guys, for the Yuri Fishers, for Brett Lebda, for, Kyle Quincy. And I was fine with that at that point in my career. I had no ego and I was on a great team. But he just made it hard on me by healthy scratching me, by trying to, change the way I penalty killed. And, even if we were number 1 in the league, he'd try and make me, kill a penalty a different way. And I couldn't do it. It was just, I read the ice. I had a skill and I was just one of those guys that wasn't good with, direction. And you just give me a basic plan. And like Jacques Lemaire, you mentioned, perfect example. He kept things simple and would just tweak you. Babs was a big power guy. His ego and whatever it was. And, we really, like I said, it just, no matter what I did. And you know what, after you play as long as I did, you're going to run into a coach that, you're not one of his guys. And, that happens. And I'm a lot better with it now than I was at the time because I couldn't understand it. All I wanted to do was win. To play guys ahead of me that weren't, that he put him in positions that they couldn't. It was nothing against my teammates, but they weren't top 4 defensemen when I had that opportunity to do it. And he put guys in that position, made them look bad, and what's worse, made the team lose. And that, that's one thing that I couldn't accept, what he's put himself, his own personal, ahead of the team. And that's, that's just one thing I just could never agree with.
And I can attest to that. When I played with Chelly, like a year after our season, Chelly, I ran. Obviously we were friends and hung out and stuff. But I saw you like a year later at Stanley's, and I was just, it's been a while since I saw you, and you were just like right away, just like bitching about how you should have been on the power play when we were together at the Wolves, and I was thinking to myself, that's insane. Like this guy's career and how successful it was. He's mad about not being on the power play. And that's, you're right. I mean, it's you're speaking the truth there. I saw firsthand of just like you did want to win, and you did believe in, you could only help the team. And I think that's something that you kind of have. I mean, you're born with it. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Who was our coach? Don. Who was the coach there? Don.
You were like Don. And I was like,
Lever.
Yeah, Don.
Yeah, and I understood it was a development league, and I was all for that. In regular season, I didn't care about being on the power play, but I'd asked him with a month left in the year to start putting me on the second unit. I thought I could be a lot of help on the second unit because you can't just jump into it. Like, it takes a little time to get your timing back, your offensive skills back. And, I hadn't been on it for, a year. So actually more than a year because I never really played power play my last couple of years in Detroit. And what does he do? First series we lost to Dallas there in Game 7. Remember, Jamie Benn got that overtime winner.
I don't even know why they sent
But
him
what's
down.
he do? Like 3 or 4 games into that series, he starts putting me in the power play, and I'm like, Jesus Christ! Now, where was that a month ago? and honestly, I could have really contributed, especially in that league, in the American League, and it wasn't about my own personal. It was just about helping
that's what I'm
the
saying.
team.
Like
And
100%, it
yeah,
wasn't
no,
personal. It was, and you had a good year that year with us. And I think too, it's just amazing to see that, like how much you still cared. Like I think most people at 48, end of their career, what you've done, they wouldn't be like even talking about that, right? So it's just it's crazy to, to realize like, wow, man, this guy is competitive, and there's a reason why he's had the success he's had. But yeah, it definitely wasn't about you. It was about trying to win. So
yeah, we had a great year that year, and it couldn't have gone better with that team. And like I said, we were one game. We lost to Dallas in that 7th game. They went out and won the Calder Cup, so that could have been us.
Yeah, and then Nux, they sent Jamie. You know, they sent Jamie Benn down, and he played like 80 NHL games that year. And they sent them down, and he played in the AHL playoffs and just like literally lit it up. But if they didn't send him down, it was. I think we would have been champs. We had a good team.
And I was driving him crazy that series. Like he didn't do nothing that whole series, but he got that goal.
Yep.
Chelly, three Norris trophies, your 10th all-time points for defensemen. When I look at this, it still amazes me, and your dedication to the game and your love for the game. With playoff games, you played 1,917 games. I played fucking 800 games, and my body is so beat up. But when I look back, and I think the arthritis, my hands, all the injuries I've had, but when I look back and I think of those last few years, it started really playing on my head. I started questioning myself. Okay, I started saying, I'm slowing up a bit. It's getting tougher to fight. All those things. At what point did it get to you where you said, listen, it's time to fucking hang it up? Like, it seemed like you never wanted to hang it up. What was the thing that said, I'm done with hockey?
You know what? When I got traded from Chicago to Detroit, actually, I was doubting myself then. Struggling, couldn't play 35 minutes anymore, that's for sure, at that age, at 38, 39 years old. So I started doubting it then. And then I got to Detroit where, I didn't have to carry the load. They had such a great team. I just fit in. I wasn't playing, as opposed to 30 to 35, I'm playing 25, right around 20, 25. And, it was so much more easier on my body. I never sweat, in the first place, but I couldn't break a sweat during games, and you're winning, and it was a second life. And then I get, 7 years into Detroit, and, it was the one run in 2002 where you're playing every other day. And my knee, I've always had, kind of a messed up knee. I was freezing it. And it got to the point where I got to the finals and the freezing was wearing off. So that's when I kind of realized, I can't put that type of stress on my body anymore. And only because of my knee. Everything else was perfect. So thank God I was on a team like Detroit where, by the end, I'm playing maybe 12, 15 minutes a game, and it was easy, and it just the way it worked out for me. And then Atlanta, that was just...
I was just going to say, it was the Atlanta Knucks. Atlanta really put...
that was the last...
When he heard a guy coughing in section 300, he was like, I gotta hang him up.
Yeah. And I wasn't, I got there after the Olympics in Atlanta. I was thinking maybe I'll get lucky one more time, play my way into shape, but I wasn't going to get the minutes. I didn't have the time. We were trying to make the playoffs in Atlanta, and it just didn't work out. And I contemplated, going back the next year, going to training camp, getting in shape, and starting out with someone and see if I still had it. But at that point, I was having trouble with my daughter, Kaylee. It was her senior year, and it was time for me to, for the first time in my life, had to make a decision between family and hockey, and I thought it was more important to watch her graduate and kind of help babysit. My wife was at her end with this one, Kaylee, and she was me, or you, Nux.
Yeah,
and I had to get there, and I had to watch her. That was one of those deals where I had to show her that I cared, and it was the right decision.
Yeah, because that year when you came to the Wolves, like, were you in the beginning of that year, I guess, were you getting offers to go play?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, and I didn't want to, I would sign one of those deals, what is a PTO, where you're making just enough where anybody could sign you. And there was no interest until, when it was coming time for playoffs. And, that's when, out of nowhere, Atlanta signed me. And like I said, the timing was terrible. I was in Vancouver at the Olympics. I hadn't worked out. Hadn't done a thing for 2.5 weeks. And then the minute I got back to Chicago, they called me up. So I felt terrible.
So, Chelly, we got to ask you about the Malibu Mob. Obviously, John Cusack, D.B. Sweeney, Eddie Vedder, all the boys, Kid Rock. How'd that all come about? Because, again, you're playing hockey in Montreal, then Chicago. Next thing you're out in Malibu. What got you to Malibu? Why? I know you love the beach. I know you love California, but what drew you to Malibu?
I'll tell you what, I'll keep it short. I was with Montreal at the time, and I was with Russ Courtnall after a game against the Kings. And you may, I don't know, did you play with Russ?
Just at the end, yeah, my last year when I came back.
We went after the game in LA. We went down to the famous Forum Club there, which every guy that played in this league, can remember that Forum Club. And Russ was friends with Tony Danza, so we spent the night there drinking. And Tony Danza was living in Malibu, and he mentioned to me, he said, "You should check it out. Beautiful place." And so, I wanted to get away, in the summer so I could spend time with my family. I was just going to start a family. And I went to Malibu and I rented for 2 years, and I fell in love with it and ended up buying it. So, after a couple of years hanging around with, Tony Danza and DB Sweeney and John Cusack, there's a group of guys that we just started to, call ourselves the Malibu Mob. So, we did everything together. We trained together. We would go out for dinners together. We had kids, a lot of us. John McEnroe was part of that. And this guy, Don Wildman, who's passed now, he was 60 years old when we met him, but he was like, the most fit, crazy, trained, but loved life. He started Vic Tanny Health Clubs, and he kept us all together. We did everything together. And, now, 30-something years later, Don's gone. There's not too many guys left from the mob in Malibu. Some have moved away, and but we still, manage the core of us. Me, McEnroe. There's guys like Randy Gerber, who's wasn't an athlete, but he, the founder of Casamigos, and this other guy Nate, Jeff Sweet. So we still got a group of guys that we still hang and do our stuff.
Yeah, speaking of, we're having DB on here too, and I was that's a lot of years. I didn't know it was that. Who's renting the place now? I know you rent it out a lot, right?
Yeah, but there's no one right now. We have it now. The family's there. A couple of my kids are there right now. During the winters when I do get a break from ESPN and from the Hawks, if I have a 3-4 day break, I get out there and, it's beautiful. And you need that break during these long winters, obviously. Like I said, I used to spend my summers there. Now I've switched that. But like I said, along the course of the years, we've had some pretty famous people that have rented the place, and they've been great. And it's been a lot of fun. I got a real special place out there.
Chelly, one last one. The Nick Nolte night. Tell me about the Nick Nolte night.
Nick Nolte, you got to remind me. Nick Nolte's been over a few times.
You went over his house one night, and you left there.
To his place.
Yeah.
Yeah, he drugged me. Nick Nolte drugged me with some kind of liquid drink that he mixed into my bottle of water. Yeah, so anyway, I took a sip of this water, and about a half hour later, I was, kind of off a little bit and lightheaded. So I said, "What the F did you give me?" He goes, "I told you to sip it." I go, "Sip my ass. What did you give me?" I forget what it was. It wasn't, I don't know. He carried it around all. Anyway, so he goes, "Well, let's go for a walk in my garden." So I couldn't even walk. I was tripping. It felt like I did acid. I've never done acid either, but I've seen movies But yeah, and he, whatever he'd given me, it didn't last long. But man, he was a character. This guy, he used to walk around. He did this movie, and he was Benjamin Franklin. So I think he never ever came out of character. He walked around Malibu in a robe, and he carried 2 big water bottles filled with that stuff, and he was just tripping all the time. But real nice guy, really interesting fella. He thought he was a doctor. Like he actually. Thought he was a doctor, and his house had a lab in there, and he called it all protocol, and it was something, this guy. But yeah, he's still in Malibu. Unfortunately, his house burned down in that last big fire. But I'll see him occasionally. He's a great guy. He's a beauty.
When you see him, do you bring up you remember when you drugged me?
No, never bring that up. But we talk for some reason, he was in Pittsburgh the year we won the Cup, and I ran into him in a hotel there, and right away we recognized each other. He's really good friends and close with John Cusack, so that's how we actually met.
That's awesome.
Chelly, we got to sneak one more thing in from a fan. He texted, who was the toughest player to defend against, and who was the toughest and meanest to play against?
All right, to defend against, I'm going to say probably Mario because of his size and his speed. He's the one guy, if he got a step on you, he was gone, and obviously he would finish and score. So he was the toughest to defend. You know, it was a challenge for me every time when we played him. So, and especially in the Stanley Cup Finals, you know, he was a handful, and then beating us there in Chicago. And then I guess the toughest and meanest guy, Nux, you could, you know, familiarize with this guy. And after it's all said and done, I respected him. That goddamn Dale Hunter.
Well,
I won't say I was scared, but I was aware he was out. He got me. I mean, he blew my knee out twice, and he wasn't afraid of you either, because he didn't care. You know, he went after me, and he knew you were going to be coming. But that guy, and give him credit, he scored some big goals. He was every bit as important as a star player to his teams. And you know, he hurt them at times with his undisciplined play, but that guy was a warrior. So if anybody, would have been Dale Hunter for sure.
I couldn't agree more with that one. Listen, one of my favorite all-time teammates, my best teammate ever, honestly. And just like back in the day, I still love you, Chelly. Always have,
Thanks,
always
Knox,
will.
love you too.
Yeah, Chelly, thanks.
Yeah.
It's always, obviously, when's the boat come out? That's why I'm on here. I want to
The
know.
boat's out April 15th. I'm counting the days, man. There's sun out
I
today. It was
bet.
67 degrees here 2 days ago.
I know.
And then it's like,
It's fucked.
yeah, now it's 30, and there was a snowstorm or slush storm last. That's crazy.
Well,
but
you'll be hearing
we're
from me
used to
more
it.
once the boat comes out, so I appreciate you coming
Absolutely.
on. And, it's always good seeing you. It's great.
We'll
You
have
too,
to make a
and to
trip.
all the people in Montreal. Yeah, for sure, Nux. You love boating. That's your thing.
Yeah, I'll have
We
to
don't
make
do
a
too
trip
much
out there.
You need a tan, Nux.
Yeah, I
yeah,
do.
yeah. Good luck with that one. Yeah, you used to be 10, Nux.
Yeah, like in
That's
September,
great.
though,
Well-
coming back from the
Yeah,
summers.
right.
But awesome stuff, Chelly. Thanks so much.